So we're back with more Emerald Dream cards to review. In this video, we're going to look at all of the Mage cards, seeing all 10 of these today. Warlock, one of them got delayed, so I've been holding off on Warlock. I think that's coming out later today, so expect a second video for Warlock cards very soon. But for now, let's go ahead and jump into this Mage stuff and this new Wisp archetype. It's all starting with Asina, the wild god for Mage. This is an 8 mana 6/8 undead with battle cry. If 20 friendly minions have died this game, deal 20 damage split among all enemies, which that's a big payoff, right? That is better than Astalor. I think we all can remember how good Astalor was, dealing, I think at the time, 16 damage. On a similar battle cry that could often just be a lethal setup. I mean, sometimes Brand helped out, but on its own, it was still just so much pressure. Anytime you had an empty board and Astalor was there, you're like, oh god, dude, I can't handle, especially like multiple Astalors going off over time. So we know that, you know, this is even bigger and can definitely be a nice threat from a damage output standpoint. The question is, how are you going to get 20 friendly minions to die in Mage of all classes, who typically doesn't play a ton of minions? They usually rely on more on spells. You know, obviously there's elementals and stuff, but 20 is a big number. That said, take a look at this. We've also got the Imbue hero power for Mage here. Blessing of the Wisp, a 2 mana hero power again. It summons 1 Wisp and deals 1 damage randomly split among all enemies. And of course, that's the base version. Every time you imbue after your first imbue, both of those numbers are going to go up. So it's going to summon 2 Wisps and deal 2 damage, 3 Wisps, deal 3 damage, 4 Wisps, deal 4 damage. And that, of course, gives you a lot of minions to die for your Asina. Not to mention, you know, oh, look, the Spirit Gatherer is another minion. So when you commit to this Wisp package, I do think it's going to be pretty easy, actually, to get 20 minions dead even reliably by turn 8. I'll also note that if you hit your imbues on time and you're hero powering enough to get all those Wisps dying, you're also going to be getting some chip damage. Like this is, you know, after the second imbue, or I guess third imbue, it's kind of an arcane missiles, and then it keeps getting bigger. 4 or 5 damage becomes possible off this Blessing of the Wisp. You know, that's going to run into minions a lot. It's going to kind of chip away at minion health, but you're going to get 1 or 2 damage to face here, 2 or 3 damage to face there. Over the course of 3 or 4 hero powers, you might have softened your opponent up by 10 health already, leaving them in a spot where Asina can be kind of that lethal finisher that just like, oh my god, I cannot deal with all these stupid little pings. They just keep pinging me to death. We've also got the Wisp Rider here as another imbue activator for the Mage class cards. This one's a 5 mana 4/4. It not only imbues your hero power, but it also triggers it. So here's even more ways, you know, to get some like turn 5 on curve. Maybe, you know, maybe by then you're summoning 3 Wisps alongside this Wisp Rider, and you're dealing, you know, a little arcane missiles to the board again. All adding up, all chipping away, all just creating these really annoying little boards. It's like death by 1,000 cuts or 1,000 Wisps and pings, basically. Opponent has to just keep dealing with the little Wisp 1/1s. And I will say too, like if they don't, then the 1/1s can kind of trade in nicely for all the leftover damage that the randomly split arcane missile type things have left behind. So it does kind of synergize nicely. All these 1 damage increments kind of start to add up and let you, you know, do some good math basically. And then this one comes in and seals the deal. Now we actually also have some additional like Wisp support cards or synergy cards here. This is the Merry Moonkin, a 4 mana 3/6. At the end of your turn, gain 1 armor. Repeat for each Wisp you control. So, you know, up to 6 Wisps here. Repeating that 6 times, I guess, is 7 armor on this guy, which is, I mean, that's nice. I will say this is directionally a little bit of a shift from the rest of the Wisp package, which is all about boom, 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 you know, the barrage of pings and stuff. This is kind of shifting back defensively, which I do kind of think you might want to lean into the pressure and just keep things up. But at the same time, you know, the imbue cards are kind of inherently low tempo, and in some ways hero powering is also low tempo, particularly early on until it starts getting stronger. So you may have to do more of a kind of whittle them down game plan as opposed to like barrage them game plan. In other words, you know, you might not be trying to hit Asina like on curve on turn 8 as a lethal. It might be more like, look, I'm just going to hang around. I'm just going to keep chipping away. Merry Moonkin helps me survive while I'm setting up for these, you know, crazy hero powers that eventually start hitting for 7 or 8 or something, you know. And it's more of a stall game plan than a like full aggression game plan. That's where Merry Moonkin would have a little bit more space to thrive. Still think he's like kind of awkward, particularly, you know, like you're not playing this on turn 4, you're probably waiting till like 6 to hero power with it or something. It might be hard to make it feel like this is really good. And if it did ever live 2 turns, like this card's insane, of course, with the end of turn it gets to repeat again. I think that's incredibly unlikely in modern Hearthstone, but it is at least a threat. Like this has to be killed by the opponent lest you get, you know, 6 more wisps and go crazy again and gain tons more armor. But this is just notably a little bit off axis from the rest of the cards we've seen so far. So next up here is Divination, 2-mana spell, destroy friendly wisp to draw 3 cards. Arcane spell, 2 mana to draw 3. That feels pretty great. It is conditional on having this wisp. Thankfully, as we saw with the Spirit Gatherer, this gives you a wisp in hand. So you'll have one like kind of in hand ready to go that can not only like, you know, shore up any weaknesses like on your Merry Moonkin or whatever if you're desperate for 1 extra armor, but gives you a more reliable 0 cost way to set up for your divination. Because there might be instances where you don't want to commit to the 2 mana hero power first, which of course gets you a wisp, but it just has that little tax, that overhead on it. Or it might be nice to just spend only 2 on this draw 3. Even if the hero power has additional upsides, you might want to look first before committing any additional mana, which, you know, I guess Wisp will also probably be in the core set. Yes, there will also be a Wisp you could hard run in your deck. I don't know if that'll be worth it. It's kind of nice to have a backup, but it's also just such a weak card inherently on its own. I don't know if the upsides on it are necessarily going to be worth it, but a possibility anyway if you just want to run the Wisp for some extra reassurance here on the divination. I mean, sometimes you'll probably just have one left over on board and you won't even need to hard play one, but just a thought anyway. Regardless, this does look like pretty efficient card draw. I will say, obviously, something that is very specific to this archetype. This is fairly parasitic in nature, which means, you know, you have to have wisps to enable divination, and our last guy, the Merry Moonkin. I will note, Asina is not actually as parasitic. Like, this worked with any friendly minions. You're probably going to want to use Wisp for this one, but I do like that theoretically, you know, if a Murloc Mage came along later, this could still be a finisher for that deck, which is nice that this does not say, like, if 20 friendly Wisps have died this game. So then one more synergy piece, another one here that is more generic, not specific to Wisps. This is Star Surge, 3-mana arcane spell, deal 1 damage to a minion, and that is improved by each friendly minion that died this game, which, you know, at some point, I guess that's going to be deal 20 damage to a minion because you're planning to kill off 20 things. So, you know, this could help you kill some of those big wild gods, a Ceaseless Expanse. Those types of cards are possible for Star Surge, but I will say Star Surge probably feels like a pretty dead card for a while. You know, even dealing like 5 damage with this is just okay. Like, that's kind of a desperation sort of thing. For this to serve as like truly, you know, nice significant removal that always kind of works, you're probably gonna have to get up to that like 8+ range, which it probably doesn't take forever if you're doing wisps. This probably makes the cut because it's just like I need enough cards, particularly, you know, we're in a 4-set meta. I suspect this gets played. I could imagine this getting cut later on though, just for a more refined game plan. This one might just take a little bit too much support as better cards enter the pool, more minions, because you do want to ultimately be playing minions to pump up your Asina. You want to be playing hero powers. Does this have as much space to get played? Probably not long term, but maybe for now. All right, so moving on to the rest of the cards here. We've got the other legendary. This is Quanzu, 3-mana, 3/4 beast, battle cry, discover a spell, and then you choose to keep it or put it on top of your opponent's deck, which, I mean, I think that's probably fine, but this is the least exciting legendary I've seen in ages. This just feels like a random neutral card to me. Am I crazy to think that it's just like, just discover a card with kind of a choose one aspect to it? It's not that particularly special to me. I don't know. I mean, so the goal, right, is like, okay, if I find something I want, cool, I've discovered a card. By the way, not great for 3-mana, 3/4. Again, it's fine, but that is very much just like a neutral card. Slightly above rate, of course, is a 3/4. It's again, it's fine. I think that's playable. And then if it's something bad or you don't get what you want, you can choose to put it on top of your opponent's deck, which is, you know, a little bit of disruption. It basically kills one draw of your opponent's. But we've had a lot of cards that have done exactly that or better, though, and they just never see play. There's like that card that puts a random spell on top of your opponent's deck or something. Just absolutely never sees play. So that is not really going to be much of an upside. I honestly would usually just rather take a bad spell that's not particularly useful than, like, you know, the slight disruption it offers my opponent. Like, even the worst spells often... you can find one of three that's going to have a little bit of utility for you, right? Like, it's going to be solid enough, may not be exactly what you need. Just having something that's solid for you is probably worth more than the very minor disruption to your opponent. Particularly, you know, Hearthstone has so much card draw these days. Just killing one draw from your opponent is really not that bad. And there's very few, like, just awful spells to give them too. Like, the worst spell is still something for them to use, potentially. They weave it in or whatever. Find some use case for it. So I don't know, man. This just, to me, almost reads 3-mana 3/4 battle cry, discover a spell, which again is fine. It's just not legendary-esque to me and not particularly strong either. It's just okay. All right, so next up here we have Spark of Life, a 1-mana spell. This one again plays with choose one, obviously. Discover a Mage spell or discover a Druid spell, which... this guy looks super cool. Like, this mix between Mage and Druid is fun. But, yeah, I mean, it's a fine card. You know, cheap little spell can be useful to toss into a deck. I like that you sort of have 6 options here. I mean, you're only ever going to really get to see 3 at a time. But if you imagine, you know, like, oh, Mage spells are maybe a little bit more offensive in nature. And then, like, Druid spells are a little bit more defensive in nature. Or maybe I can find a way to stay alive with Druid stuff or kill them with Mage stuff. You know, you get kind of 2 branching paths. And then within those paths, you get 3 choices as well. So, you know, a lot of options basically to think about here as far as this spell is concerned, which that flexibility probably affords this some play. I think this absolutely looks reasonable enough. It's cheap enough that it's not hard to squeeze this in. All right, so next up, another fusing here of Druid and Mage. I really do like this, like, theming here. 2-mana arcane spell, get a Moonfire and a Starfire and give them spell damage +1, which... yeah, I don't love this, man, like, from a power output standpoint. The spell damage here doesn't really make either of these good cards in my mind. I mean, sure, there's nothing wrong with a 0-mana deal 2, but keep in mind you spent 2 mana to do it, right? You had some cost committed before you ever played the Moonfire. And then Starfire, I mean, damage is damage. You don't hate dealing 6 damage. Like, you know, I think when you discover this sometimes, you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, sick. I have 8 mana. This is 8 damage. They're dead. That'll be great. I don't know if a Mage is going to commit to running that, though. It's nice in some ways to, like, okay, I'll commit the 2 mana early and then save this damage up for later. But there's just so many ways to deal effective damage. So much lethality in Hearthstone. Mage has a lot of it, too. I just don't really know if this is worth it. So feels like one of those cool Discover cards that's useful. But beyond that, I don't know if I see a lot of use case for this. And then our final card here is Forbidden Shrine, a new location for Mage. Looks beautiful. 1 mana and 3 durability. It spends all your mana and casts a random spell that costs that much, which is kind of crazy, dude. I kind of like this in theory, that it's just a curve filler, right? It's like, ah, crap, I didn't hit what I needed, or this is an awkward turn. I'm just going to toss it up to Fate, toss it up to Yogg, toss it up to the Shrine, whatever it may be, and kind of hope for the best, right? I think that's really what you can expect here. And you know, there are some great spells at given mana costs too. Like, you know, if you go into turn 10 and you're just desperate for something to do, like, you've probably got a good chance to do something pretty cool. I mean, this pool maybe is actually getting worse right now a little bit. Like, Typhoon, it's not great. Table Flip's actually kind of bad, but like, if you had a Dwarf Planet or a Sea Shanty, it's an okay turn. Sea Shanty's not great, 3/5/5s, but you know, you didn't have anything else to do, you're not mad about that. Dwarf Planet, you might actually be pretty pumped. Projection Orb, actually kind of insane potentially. If you're running out of spells, that could be nutty, right? So there are some pools where you might have some cool, reliable results. But anyway, the takeaway is not that you're like expecting good results. It's that it's a desperation type play, and it only ever costs you the 1 mana up front to have that option. Like, you may not go to it, you may have plenty of things to do, but for a slot in your deck and for that 1 mana up front, is it worth it to have that backup plan? And of course, it's not always going to be the whole turn either. It's like, okay, I'm on turn 8, I've got 5 mana to spend, let's just spend 3 here and see what happens, right? Let's see if we can't get a good result. I don't hate that. I will say, you know, since you're usually finishing the turn on this card, on the activation, there is a little bit of risk inherent to that, because like if you play a 5 mana minion out first and then you hit Forbidden Shrine, given that it's random with like random targets or whatever, you know, you could accidentally destroy your own minion, that sort of thing. It would be kind of nice if you could commit 3 mana up front, like do the thing, and then I'll play my 5 mana card. But of course that doesn't work, because this is spending all your mana, as is the case for, you know, historically all these forbidden cards. So I don't know, dude. Part of me likes to embrace the chaos on this, because it just feels like it's a good way to fill in gaps. The other side of me says, man, that is so inconsistent and so risky. Maybe it's not worth it. I'm kind of torn, but I like it. I think I would play this. All right, so all that said, let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Asina is a 4-star card. Spirit Gatherer is a 4-star card. Wisp Rider is a 4-star card. Merry Moonkin is a 3-star card. Divination is a 4-star card. Star Surge is a 2-star card. Kwanzu is a 3-star card. Spark of Life is a 3-star card. Stellar Balance is a 2-star card. Forbidden Shrine is a 3-star card. Yeah, and there you go. Pretty interesting mage set. I kind of like that this is a new archetype of sorts, you know, like it's doing something different. Playing around with Wisps is really, really cool. So excited to actually give this stuff a try. A little bit scared of this card at the same time. 20's a lot, so I guess we'll see. I'm still in general with these imbue cards thinking like a lot of the times hitting the button isn't going to feel very good for a while. It's like, you know, just like how much mana do you have to spend to make these things feel good? Is it 10? Is it 12? Is it 8? You know, I think it's like 15 sometimes. So, you know, how many turns does that take? How quickly does all that come together? We'll see. I don't know. Some of this is going to take some real play to see just how good it feels, but this one definitely looks promising and fun indeed. So share your thoughts on these cards down below. Thanks so much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.